On a quiet Monday morning in July 1841, a ferryman steering his small boat along the Hudson River spotted something tangled among the reeds near the shore. At first it looked like discarded cloth, pale and floating with the tide. But as he drew closer, the shape took form, a woman's body drifting face up, her hair spreading like dark silk over the water. Her white summer dress was torn, one shoe missing, and faint bruises marked her neck. The ferryman shouted for help. Within an hour, the riverbank filled with onlookers, boatmen, farmers, curious citizens, all staring silently as the lifeless woman was pulled from the current. That day, New York City would meet a name it would never forget, Mary Cecilia Rogers, known to thousands as the beautiful Cigar Girl. She had been a familiar face behind the counter of a fashionable tobacco shop on Broadway, where men of status and ambition stopped daily just to see her smile. Now her death would become one of the most haunting mysteries in American history, a story of beauty, scandal, obsession, and tragedy that would expose the shadows behind a city trying to look modern and civilized. Mary was born in 1820 in the quiet town of Lyme, Connecticut. Her father, a veteran and tavern keeper, died when she was still a child. An explosion in his gunpowder store left her mother, Phoebe Rogers, widowed and poor. Seeking a better life, Phoebe moved them to New York City, a place exploding with ambition and vice. By the late 1830s, New York was a city of glaring contrasts, marble mansions beside slums, carriages rolling past beggars, and factories belching smoke into the sky. Amid the noise and chaos, Mary stood out like a vision. At age 17, she found work at Anderson's Tobacco Emporium on Broadway. The shop quickly became famous, not for its cigars, but for its clerk. Newspapers wrote about her charm. Poets described her grace. Even respectable men found excuses to visit. She greeted everyone politely, always composed, always distant. Her beauty, they said, had a sadness about it, as if she carried some secret sorrow no one dared ask about. In an era when women had few paths beyond marriage or servitude, Mary Rogers had achieved something rare, fame. But fame in New York was never safe. In October 1838, Mary vanished. She left for work one morning and never returned. For days, her employer and mother waited anxiously as rumors spread that she'd been abducted or worse. Newspapers ran small notices. Disappearance of a young lady, Miss Mary Rogers. Then, just as the city's curiosity reached its peak, she reappeared, calm and unharmed. She said she had been visiting friends in the countryside. No explanation beyond that, but whispers spread that something darker had happened, that perhaps she'd been attacked or had fled an unwanted situation. The mystery faded over time. She returned to work, and the shop once again filled with men eager for her smile. But some said she was never quite the same again, quieter, distant, as if a shadow had followed her home. On Sunday, July 25th, Mary told her mother she planned to visit her aunt in Hoboken, New Jersey, a popular leisure spot across the Hudson known for its gardens and river walks. It was a warm summer day. She wore a light blue dress, a bonnet, and carried a small parasol. She promised to be home by evening. When night fell and she hadn't returned, her mother grew restless. By the next morning, panic set in. For 3 days, no word came. Then, on the morning of July 28th, her body surfaced from the Hudson River. The coroner noted bruises on her shoulders and neck, signs of struggle, and traces of dirt under her nails. Her clothes were disheveled, her bonnet missing. The cause of death was listed as asphyxia by violence. The newspapers smelled blood. Not just literal, but the kind that sells. Within hours, Mary's story consumed New York's front pages. The New York Herald, the Sun, and the Tribune printed dramatic sketches of her face and wild theories of how she'd died. Was it a lover's quarrel? A robbery? A gang attack? Men who once flirted with her from across the shop counter now debated her morality in public taverns. The story of Mary Rogers became a spectacle, an early version of what we now call media frenzy. Reporters described her as both a victim and a fallen woman, Pamphlets were sold in the streets titled The Life and Death of the Beautiful Cigar Girl, and beneath the city's fascination ran an uglier current, the belief that her beauty had somehow invited her doom. The main suspect was Daniel Payne, Mary's fiancé, a clerk known for his troubled drinking habits. Witnesses said they had quarreled weeks before her death. When questioned, Payne seemed broken, saying only, "The world will never know how much I loved her." Days later, he vanished. Weeks after the investigation began, his body was found in a thicket near Sybil's Cave in Hoboken, the same area where Mary's was discovered. Beside him lay an empty bottle labeled laudanum, a common poison, and a note that read, "To the world, here I am. I could not remain. She is gone, and I am gone." The public took it as confession, but the police found no proof linking him to her death. Payne's suicide only deepened the mystery. 2 years later, a strange confession surfaced. A woman named Mrs. Loss, who ran a tavern in Hoboken, told neighbors that Mary had come to her establishment seeking a secret procedure, an abortion, aided by Mrs. Loss's son and his companion. They said the procedure had gone wrong, that Mary had died suddenly, and her body had been placed in the river to hide the evidence. The newspapers printed every word. But there was no trial, no proof, only gossip and guilt. Mrs. Loss died soon after, and the alleged accomplices disappeared. The truth of Mary's final moments slipped away, swallowed by rumor and river. In 1842, writer Edgar Allan Poe took Mary's story and transformed it into fiction, The Mystery of Marie Rogêt. He moved the setting to Paris, but every clue mirrored the real case. Poe used her death as a blueprint to create a story that combined logic and deduction, an early form of detective reasoning. It was the seed from which modern crime fiction would grow. Through Poe, Mary Rogers became immortal not as a victim, but as a muse of mystery. Years passed. New York grew upward, louder, richer. Factories rose where gardens once bloomed. The river kept its secrets. Mary's mother, Phoebe, died quietly, her heart long broken. The cigar shop on Broadway closed. The men who once spoke of the beautiful cigar girl moved on to new scandals. Today, only historians and true crime devotees remember her name, but in her death lies a story that never truly ended, a reflection of how society consumes tragedy, then forgets the person inside it. Mary Rogers was not just a murder victim. She was a symbol of her era, of the dangers faced by women in a city that saw them as ornaments, of the media's hunger for spectacle, and of the silence that follows injustice when truth becomes inconvenient. Standing by the Hudson today, it's easy to forget how close that water runs to history. Somewhere in its depths, the echoes of that summer morning still linger, the rush of oars, the crowd's murmurs, the faint tolling of church bells over the water. Mary Rogers's death remains officially unsolved, her case closed, her files faded, her name reduced to a headline. But she left behind something enduring, a question. Why are some lives turned into stories while others are forgotten? Why do we remember her beauty, but not her pain? Perhaps the real mystery of Mary Rogers isn't who killed her, but how the city she helped make famous let her vanish twice. Once from the world and once from memory. The Hudson keeps her secrets, but history keeps her ghost. Please, if you liked this story, stay tuned. Like and subscribe for us to make better quality contents like this.